The morning sun painted the wheat fields of New Eden in golden light. Jake Morrison stood on his porch drinking coffee and watching the endless waves of grain move in the gentle breeze. The sight never got old, even after 15 years as Colonie administrator. 50,000 people called this world home, and every morning Jake felt proud of what they had built together. "Dad, look what I found." Amy ran up to him, her small hands cupped around something precious. She was 8 years old with bright eyes and dirt on her knees from playing in the fields. Jake knelt down as she opened her hands. A tiny blue flower rested in her palm, its petals shimmering in the sunlight. It was a native plant that only bloomed once a year. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Jake said, ruffling her hair. "Just like this whole world." Amy beamed and ran back to her friends who were playing hide-and-seek among the grain stalks. Their laughter carried on the wind, mixing with the sound of farming machines in the distance. Life on New Eden was simple and good. Jake walked to his office in the main settlement. The buildings were made of local stone and wood, designed to blend with the natural landscape. People waved to him as he passed. Mrs. Betty called out from her garden shop asking about the weather forecast. Old Pete sat on his usual bench, feeding seeds to the colorful local birds. At his desk, Jake reviewed the morning reports. The harvest was going well. The medical center reported only minor injuries from farm work. The school had organized a science fair for next week. Crime was almost zero, just a few arguments between neighbors that the local council had already settled. Everything was peaceful and normal. On the other side of human space, Lisa Campbell was having a different kind of morning. She stood in the control room of the Haven's Rest mining facility, watching giant machines dig deep into the planet's surface. The work never stopped here. 80,000 people lived on Haven's Rest, mining the rare minerals that powered human ships and cities. "How are the deep tunnels looking?" Lisa asked her assistant, Tony. "Good numbers today," Tony replied, checking his tablet. "The new vein we found last month is rich in quantum crystals. Earth is going to be very happy with this shipment." Lisa nodded. Haven's Rest was not as pretty as the farming worlds, but it was important. The miners worked hard and took pride in their job. Many families had been here for 3 generations, carving homes out of the Rocky Mountains and building a community in the deep caverns. The children here played in underground, parks lit by artificial suns. They learned about mining and engineering in schools built into the mountain walls. It was a different life from the farmers on worlds like New Eden, but it was a good life. Both colonies were part of something bigger. Humanity had spread to dozens of worlds over the past century, always looking for new places to live and work. They had met other alien species along the way. Some became friends and trading partners. Others kept to themselves but caused no trouble. The galaxy seemed like a peaceful place where different species could live side by side. Admiral Ryan Tucker commanded the human fleet from his flagship, the UES Defiance. His job was to protect the trade routes between human worlds and keep the peace with alien neighbors. His ships were built for exploration and defense, not for war. Most of them carried more scientists than soldiers. Ryan sat in his command chair, reading routine reports. From across human space, colony requests for new equipment, trade disputes that needed settling, requests for medical supplies. The usual business of keeping dozens of worlds connected and supplied. "Sir, we're getting some unusual signals from the outer rim," said Captain Susan Blake, his intelligence officer. She was a smart woman who paid attention to details others might miss. Ryan looked up from his reports. "What kind of signals?" "Heavy ship movements from the Zethkari Empire. More than we've seen before. Could be military exercises, but the pattern is strange." Ryan frowned. The Zethkari were a reptilian species that controlled many worlds on the far edge of known space. Humans had met them a few times in diplomatic meetings, but the contact was limited. They seemed to prefer keeping to themselves. "Keep watching them," Ryan said, "but they're probably just moving their trade fleets around." The Galactic Concordat agreement says no species can build up military forces for aggressive purposes. Everyone signed that treaty. Susan nodded but made notes to increase monitoring. Something felt wrong about the Zethkari movements, but she could not put her finger on what it was. On New Eden, the day continued peacefully. Farmers brought in their crops while children played in the streets. The local restaurant served fresh bread and vegetables grown in the colony's gardens. People talked about simple things like the weather, their families, and plans for the weekend. Jake picked up Amy from school and they walked home together. She chattered about her lessons and showed him drawings she had made of the local animals. They stopped at the market to buy ingredients for dinner. The shopkeeper's wife asked about Amy's upcoming birthday party. "We're going to have it in the big field behind our house," Amy said excitedly. "Mom said we can invite everyone in the neighborhood." The shopkeeper smiled. "That sounds wonderful. I'll make sure to save some of those sweet cakes you like." As evening approached, both colonies settled into their quiet routines. On New Eden, families gathered for dinner around tables filled with fresh food. Children did their homework while parents discussed the day's work. The elderly sat on porches, watching the stars appear in the clear sky. On Haven's Rest, the night shift took over the mining operations. Families in the underground city turned on their lights and cooked meals in their rock-carved homes. The miners' children played games in the tunnels while their parents shared stories of the day's work. Both worlds were examples of human achievement. They showed how people could build good lives on distant planets, working together to create communities where children could grow up safe and happy. No one suspected that death was already moving toward them through the darkness of space. Zethkari fleets had been traveling for months, their ships hidden by advanced stealth technology. Admiral Caxthor stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the tactical displays that showed human colony positions. His orders were simple and brutal. The humans had expanded too far into space that the Zethkari Empire wanted for themselves. Rather than negotiate or make demands, the Emperor had decided to send a message that would terrify humanity into giving up their outer colonies. That message would be written in blood and fire. As Jake tucked Amy into bed that night, she looked up at him with sleepy eyes. "Dad, will we always live here on New Eden?" "I hope so, sweetheart," Jake said, kissing her forehead. "This is our home. Nothing will ever change that." Outside her window, the wheat fields whispered in the night breeze under a sky full of peaceful stars. Tomorrow would bring another perfect day on New Eden, or so everyone believed. None of them knew that tomorrow would bring death from the stars, and everything they had built would turn to ash and memory. The attack came without warning on a Tuesday morning. Jake Morrison was reviewing harvest reports when the emergency alarm started screaming across New Eden. The sound was so loud and sudden that he dropped his coffee cup, watching it shatter on the floor. He had never heard those alarms before. They were only supposed to ring if the colony was in deadly danger. He ran outside and looked up at the sky. What he saw made his blood turn cold. Hundreds of alien ships hung in the air above, New Eden like dark clouds. They were massive, bigger than anything Jake had ever seen. Their hulls were black and covered with weapon ports that glowed with evil red light. The ships had sharp edges and looked like they were built for one purpose only: to kill all civilians. "To emergency shelters immediately." Jake's voice cracked as he spoke into his communicator. "This is not a drill. Get to the shelters now." But there was no time. The alien ships opened fire without giving any warning or making any demands. Beams of superheated plasma rained down from the sky like deadly lightning. The first shots hit the power station, turning it into a ball of fire that could be seen from space. The second wave targeted the communication center, the hospital, and the school. Jake watched in horror as the wheat fields that had been golden and beautiful just minutes before turned into smoking craters of black glass. The heat from the alien weapons was so intense that it melted the soil itself. "Amy!" he screamed, running toward the school where his daughter should be safe in her classroom. But the building was already gone, replaced by a burning hole in the ground. People were running everywhere, screaming in terror and confusion. Parents searched for their children while children cried for their parents. The elderly and sick could not move fast enough to escape the deadly beams that kept falling from the sky. Jake tried to organize evacuations, but the colony's few transport ships could not carry everyone. They had been built for peaceful cargo runs, not emergency escapes. The ships that managed to take off were shot down by alien fighters before they could reach space. "Why are they doing this?" Someone shouted over the noise of explosions. "We never hurt anyone." Jake had no answer. The attack made no sense. New Eden had no military value. They were just farmers growing food and raising families. They had never threatened anyone or taken anything that belonged to others. As the bombardment continued, Jake managed to reach the emergency communication center in the underground bunker. His hands shook as he activated the long-range transmitter to send a message to Earth. "This is New Eden Colony Administrator Jake Morrison," he said into the microphone. "We are under attack by unknown alien forces. They came without warning. No demands, no negotiations. They are killing everyone, men, women, children. They are killing us all." The building shook as another plasma beam hit nearby. Dust fell from the ceiling and the lights flickered. The attackers appear to be reptilian. Large ships, advanced weapons. They are not trying to capture the colony. They are trying to destroy it completely. If anyone receives this message, tell our families we tried to protect the innocent. Tell them we... The transmission cut off as the bunker took a direct hit. Jake Morrison died trying to save his people, just like his daughter Amy had died in her classroom, just like 50,000 other innocent humans died that day. At the same time, the same horror was happening on Haven's Rest. Lisa Campbell was in the deep mining tunnels when the attack began. The first she knew of it was when the ground started shaking like an earthquake. Mining equipment fell over and tunnel lights went out as the power grid failed. "What's happening up there?" she shouted to her workers. Tony came running down the tunnel, his face white with fear. "Ships! Alien ships everywhere. They're bombing the surface facilities." Lisa activated her emergency communicator and tried to contact the surface. All she heard was static mixed with the sounds of explosions and screaming. "Get everyone into the deepest tunnels," she ordered. "Seal the blast doors. Maybe we can wait this out." But the alien weapons were too powerful. The plasma beams burned through solid rock like it was paper. The mountain that had protected the miners for generations began to collapse as the bombardment continued. Lisa worked frantically to evacuate families deeper into the tunnel system. She helped children and elderly people move through the narrow passages while the ceiling shook and cracked above them. "Why are they attacking us?" a young mother asked, holding her baby close. "We never did anything wrong." "I don't know," Lisa replied. She wished she had an answer, but the truth was that the attack made no sense. Haven's Rest was a mining colony. They dug minerals from the ground and sent them to other human worlds. They had no weapons, no military forces, nothing that could threaten anyone. Lisa managed to activate the colony's emergency beacon before the communication center was destroyed. The beacon would send a signal to human space telling them that Haven's Rest was under attack, but by the time help could arrive, it would be too late. The bombing continued for 6 hours. When it finally stopped, both New Eden and Haven's Rest were nothing but smoking ruins. The beautiful wheat fields were gone. The underground city was buried under tons of collapsed rock. The hospitals, schools, homes, and dreams of 130,000 humans had been turned to ash. Then the alien ships broadcast a message across known space. The voice was cold and harsh, speaking in perfect human language. "We are the Zethkari Empire. The soft-skinned humans have expanded too far into our space. This is the price of your arrogance. Surrender your outer colonies immediately, or face complete extinction. You have 7 days to comply." Admiral Ryan Tucker received the news aboard his flagship. He sat in his command chair and watched the recorded footage from the attacks. His face went white as he saw the orbital bombardment turn peaceful colonies into wastelands. "How many survivors?" he asked quietly. Captain Susan Blake checked her reports. Her voice was barely a whisper. "None confirmed from New Eden. Maybe a few hundred from Haven's Rest deep tunnels, but we cannot reach them." "Children?" 28,000 children dead, sir. Schools, playgrounds, homes, all targeted deliberately." Ryan closed his eyes. In all his years of service, he had never seen such senseless cruelty. The Zethkari had not tried to capture the colonies or steal their resources. They had simply murdered everyone they could find. "What does the Galactic Concordat say about this?" Ryan asked. Susan's voice was bitter. They express deep concern and call for measured dialogue. They suggest humanity should withdraw from the Outer Rim to prevent further unfortunate incidents. Unfortunate incidents. Ryan's voice was dangerously quiet. They call the murder of 130,000 civilians an unfortunate incident? The other species are afraid, sir. The Zethkari Empire has thousands of ships. No one wants to fight them. Ryan stood up slowly. His hands were shaking, but not from fear. They were shaking from rage that burned in his chest like a nuclear fire. "Send a message to Earth," he said. "Tell them what happened here. Tell them exactly what the Zethkari did to innocent families. Tell them that little Amy Morrison died in her school and Jake Morrison died trying to save his people, sir. And tell them that humanity stands alone. No one will help us. No one will defend us. If we want justice for these murders, we will have to take it ourselves." Captain Blake nodded and began typing the message. As she worked, she thought about the children who had died that day. She thought about the families who had been building good lives on distant worlds. She thought about the monsters who had killed them for no reason except cruelty. The Zethkari Empire thought they had sent a message to frighten humanity into submission. Instead, they had made the worst mistake in galactic history. They had awakened something in humanity that had been sleeping for centuries, something that would not rest until every last one of them paid for what they had done to the innocent. The dragon was stirring, and its anger would burn across the stars. The news reached Earth like a thunderbolt that shook the entire planet. President Helen Carter sat in the emergency meeting room deep beneath the Capitol building. Around the table sat the most powerful leaders in human space. Military commanders, intelligence directors, and government officials all stared at the screen showing footage from New Eden and Haven's Rest. The images were horrific. Satellite recordings showed plasma beams turning schools into craters. Thermal scans revealed the heat signatures of children disappearing in seconds as alien weapons vaporized everything they touched. The beautiful wheat fields of New Eden were now fields of black glass that would never grow anything again. "How many?" President Carter asked quietly. General Patricia Stone, commander of the Terran Marine Corps, checked her report. 130,000 confirmed dead. 28,000 were children under 16 years old. The room fell silent. Everyone knew those numbers represented more than statistics. They represented families destroyed, dreams ended, futures that would never exist. "What did the Zethkari demand before the attack?" Carter asked. "Nothing," replied Director Carl Hughes from the Intelligence Service. "No warning, no negotiations, no demands of any kind. They simply appeared and started killing civilians." Fleet Admiral Nathan Cross leaned forward. He was an old man who had spent his life protecting human space through diplomacy and careful peacekeeping. "The Galactic Concordat has responded. They suggest we withdraw from the Outer Rim to avoid further incidents." "Incidents?" President Carter's voice was ice cold. "They call the murder of children incidents? The other species are afraid of the Zethkari Empire," Cross continued. "They have over 10,000 warships. No one wants to fight them." Carter stood up slowly. She had been president for 8 years, always working for peace and cooperation with alien species. She had believed that reasonable beings could solve problems through talking and compromise. That belief died in the flames of New Eden. "For 200 years we have been the peacemakers," she said to the room. "We explored space with open hands and open hearts. We helped other species, shared our knowledge, and asked for nothing but friendship in return. Today that ends." She turned to Admiral Cross. "Activate the Terran War Council. You have supreme command of all human military forces." Cross nodded grimly. He had hoped to never hear those words. "General Stone, begin full mobilization of the Marine Corps. I want every human with military training ready for combat." "Yes, Madam President." "Director Hughes, activate Project Prometheus. It's time to use what we've been hiding." Hughes smiled for the first time that day. Project Prometheus was humanity's secret weapons program, hidden from the galaxy for decades. The other species thought humans were peaceful farmers and traders. They had no idea what humanity could build when they put their minds to war. Within hours, the transformation began. Earth's orbital shipyards, which had been building cargo vessels and passenger liners, suddenly retooled for military production. The peaceful factories that made farming equipment began producing weapons and armor. Research stations that studied alien plants started designing new ways to kill alien soldiers. On Mars, the mining facilities that extracted minerals for peaceful trade began churning out the raw materials for warships. The asteroid belt colonies, which had been quietly mining rocks for decades, revealed that they had been secretly building military supplies the entire time. Europa, Jupiter's ice moon, opened hidden facilities that had been disguised as research stations. Inside were weapons laboratories working on technology that bent the laws of physics, quantum bombs that could destroy entire fleets, stealth systems that made ships invisible to any known sensor, AI computers that could think faster than any biological brain. Captain Susan Blake found herself promoted to intelligence commander overnight. Her peaceful job of monitoring trade routes became a war mission to learn everything possible about Zethkari military capabilities. "What do we know about them?" Admiral Cross asked during their first war planning meeting. "They're reptilian, cold-blooded, and about 8 feet tall," Susan reported. "Their empire spans 40 star systems with a population of around 50 billion. They've been expanding aggressively for the past century, wiping out smaller species that get in their way." "Military strength?" "Over 10,000 warships, mostly heavy cruisers and battleships. They fight with brute force tactics, overwhelming firepower, and numerical superiority. Their technology is advanced but not innovative. They build bigger guns instead of smarter weapons." Admiral Cross studied the tactical displays. The numbers looked impossible. Humanity had fewer than 2,000 military ships, and most of those were built for exploration and peacekeeping, not war. But humans had advantages the Zethkari never suspected. "Show them Project Prometheus," Cross ordered. Hughes activated a holographic display that showed weapons and ships beyond anything the galaxy had seen. Stealth fighters that could appear and disappear like ghosts. Battle cruisers equipped with AI systems that could predict enemy movements before they happened. Quantum torpedoes that could punch through any known armor. "How long have we been building these?" Cross asked. 200 years, Hughes replied. "Every time we met a new alien species, we studied their technology and their weaknesses. Every time we signed a peace treaty, we prepared for the day someone would break it. The galaxy thinks we're naive farmers. They have no idea what humans can do when we stop playing nice." Cross smiled grimly. "How long until we can deploy them?" "The first battle groups will be ready in 6 months. Full production in 1 year. Too slow. People are dying out there." Admiral Ryan Tucker's remaining fleet had been conducting hit-and-run attacks against Zethkari supply lines. Every engagement taught humanity more about their enemies' weaknesses. The aliens were strong but predictable. They used the same tactics over and over, never adapting to changing situations. "They fight like machines," Tucker reported during a secure communication with Earth. "No creativity, no innovation. When we hit them from an unexpected angle, they take several minutes to respond. Their commanders are too arrogant to believe anyone would dare attack them." "Can you hold out until reinforcements arrive?" Cross asked. "We'll hold," Tucker replied. "Every day we buy is another day for you to build the ships we need to make them pay." The mobilization continued across human space. Merchant ships were converted into troop transports. Civilian pilots volunteered for military service. Engineers who had designed peaceful machines began creating instruments of war. But the most important change was in the human spirit itself. For generations, humanity had chosen cooperation over conflict. They had believed that reasonable beings could solve problems through discussion. They had thought that showing weakness was the same as showing strength. The massacre at New Eden and Haven's Rest burned that naive belief out of every human heart. In schools across human space, children learned new lessons about the galaxy. They learned that some species could not be reasoned with. They learned that sometimes good people had to fight to protect the innocent. They learned that peace was not the absence of war, but the presence of those willing to defend it. Young adults who had planned careers as farmers and scientists enlisted in the military. Parents who had raised their children to be peaceful teachers and doctors now taught them to be soldiers and warriors. The transformation was not just military, it was spiritual, emotional, and complete. President Carter addressed the human species in a broadcast that reached every world, every ship, and every human in the galaxy. "My fellow humans," she began, "we stand at a crossroads. For 2 centuries, we have chosen the path of peace, believing that all beings in the galaxy shared our desire for cooperation and understanding. Recent events have shown us that we were wrong." The broadcast showed footage from the destroyed colonies, children's toys melted by plasma fire, schools reduced to smoking craters, families who would never see another sunrise. The HFY Empire has chosen to make us their enemy. They believe we are weak because we chose peace. They think we will surrender because we value life. They are about to learn how wrong they are. Carter's voice grew stronger with each word. "We did not ask for this war, but we will finish it. We did not choose to be warriors, but we will become the best warriors the galaxy has ever seen. We will not rest until every innocent life is avenged and every child can sleep safely under human protection." The broadcast ended with a simple message that spread across human space like wildfire. "The dragon wakes. Let the galaxy tremble." In the depths of space, HFY commanders received reports of increased human military activity. They dismissed it as the desperate flailing of a weak species about to surrender. They had no idea that they had just made the greatest mistake in galactic history. They had awakened something in humanity that had been sleeping for centuries, waiting for the day it would be needed. That day had come, and the galaxy would never be the same. 6 months after the massacre, humanity struck back. Operation Retribution began not with massive fleets or grand battles, but with silence and shadows. The HFY Empire had ruled through fear and brute force for so long that they had forgotten what it meant to face an enemy that could think. Captain Alex Rodriguez commanded a squadron of 12 ships that did not appear on any official human fleet roster. His vessels were painted black as space itself, and equipped with quantum stealth systems that made them invisible to every known sensor in the galaxy. "Target acquired," his weapons officer whispered as they approached the HFY home system. Ahead of them floated the pride of the alien empire, a massive orbital shipyard that had been building warships for 300 years. The shipyard was bigger than most cities, protected by energy shields and defended by a fleet of guard ships. It represented centuries of HFY engineering and the source of their military might. "Remember the children of New Eden," Rodriguez said quietly into his communicator. "Remember the families of Haven's Rest. Today we begin to balance the scales." The attack lasted exactly 4 minutes. Rodriguez's ships fired quantum torpedoes that passed through the shipyard's shields like they were made of paper. The weapons were designed by human scientists who had studied alien technology for decades and found ways to make it useless. The explosions could be seen from the planet's surface, bright flashes that lit up the sky like new stars being born. When the light faded, 3 centuries of HFY shipbuilding capability had been turned into floating debris. At the same time, on the other side of the galaxy, Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos was fighting a different kind of battle. She sat in a room full of computers, her fingers flying across keyboards as she invaded the most secure networks in the HFY Empire. "I'm in," she announced to her team, "accessing their military communication system now." The aliens had built their networks to be impenetrable, but they had made one mistake. They had underestimated human creativity and determination. Maria's team had spent months learning how HFY computers worked, finding weaknesses that the aliens never knew existed. "Upload the virus," Maria ordered. The program they released was like a digital plague that spread through every HFY military network. It changed orders, mixed up supply schedules, and sent false information to fleet commanders. Suddenly, HFY ships were receiving orders to attack their own allies or retreat from battles they were winning. "Their entire command structure is falling apart," Maria reported. "They don't know which orders are real and which are fake." The confusion spread across the HFY Empire like wildfire. Fleet commanders who had been preparing to attack human colonies found themselves receiving orders to defend systems that were not under threat. Supply ships delivered food to empty space while military bases ran out of ammunition. The psychological effect was even more devastating than the physical damage. The Zethkari had believed they were invincible, but suddenly, their own technology was betraying them. Their leaders began to suspect each other of treason. Trust, the foundation of any military organization, began to crumble. But the real test was yet to come. When news of the shipyard's destruction reached the Zethkari High Command, they reacted exactly as humans had expected. They sent a massive fleet toward human space, determined to crush the upstart species that dared to fight back. Admiral Caxthor, the same commander who had led the attack on New Eden, commanded 1,200 warships in the largest Zethkari fleet ever assembled. His orders were simple: find the humans and exterminate them completely. They think they can hide behind their tricks and cowardly attacks, he told his officers. When we find them, we will show them what real warfare looks like. The Zethkari fleet was indeed massive and powerful. Their ships were built like floating fortresses, armed with weapons that could crack planets and protected by armor that had never been penetrated. They had crushed a dozen species over the centuries, and they expected to crush humanity just as easily. They were about to learn that humans had spent those 6 months doing more than just building weapons. Admiral Ryan Tucker waited for them at Kepler's Gate, a strategic point where several jump routes came together. His fleet looked pitifully small compared to the Zethkari armada, only 400 ships against 1,200 alien vessels. But Tucker's ships were not the same vessels that had been protecting human space 6 months ago. These were weapons of war designed by the best minds humanity had ever produced, equipped with technology that would have seemed like magic to earlier generations. All ships, this is Admiral Tucker, he broadcast to his fleet. Today we fight not just for humanity, but for every innocent life taken by these monsters. Today we show the galaxy what happens when you murder our children. The Battle of Kepler's Gate began when the Zethkari fleet dropped out of hyperspace and immediately attacked. They used their standard tactics, overwhelming firepower delivered by massive formations of heavy ships. But the humans were ready for them. Tucker's vessels moved like dancers through space, their AI-controlled systems predicting Zethkari movements before the aliens made them. When the enemy fired their massive plasma cannons, human ships were already somewhere else, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. The quantum stealth systems made individual human ships nearly impossible to target. One moment a Zethkari captain would have a clear shot at a human cruiser. The next moment the target would vanish from his sensors completely. "Where are they?" Caxthor demanded as his flagship's weapons fired at empty space. "How are they doing this?" His tactical officer had no answer. The human ships seemed to appear and disappear at will, striking with precision weapons that cut through Zethkari armor like it was made of cloth. But the real shock came when the human AI systems began to coordinate their attacks. Every human ship in the battle was connected to every other ship, sharing information instantly across the entire fleet. When one ship learned something about Zethkari tactics, all 400 ships knew it immediately. The aliens, meanwhile, were fighting as individuals. Their commanders were proud warriors who refused to take orders from anyone but their immediate superiors. They had no system for sharing information quickly, no way to adapt their tactics in real time. "They're using our own formations against us," one Zethkari captain reported. "Every time we change our approach, they counter it before we can execute." Either way, battle raged for 18 hours. The Zethkari kept expecting their superior numbers to overwhelm the humans, but it never happened. Every time they thought they had surrounded a human ship, it would vanish from their sensors only to reappear behind them. Human weapons were smaller than Zethkari guns, but they were infinitely more precise. While alien plasma cannons sprayed energy in all directions, human quantum torpedoes struck exactly where they were aimed, finding weak points in enemy armor that even the Zethkari did not know existed. As the battle continued, something remarkable happened. The human fleet began to fight as a single organism, 400 ships moving with perfect coordination. They struck like a sword, cutting through Zethkari formations with surgical precision. The aliens had never faced anything like it. There, Empire had been built on the principle that bigger was always better, that more ships and more firepower would always win. They had no answer for an enemy that was smarter, faster, and more adaptable than they were. When the battle finally ended, 900 Zethkari ships had been destroyed. The survivors fled in panic, carrying news of their defeat back to the Empire. The humans had lost only 80 vessels, and most of those were damaged rather than destroyed. Admiral Caxthor's flagship was among the wreckage, the commander who had murdered children dying in the same fire he had brought to New Eden. Across the galaxy, news of the battle spread like wildfire. The Zethkari Empire, which had seemed invincible for centuries, had been defeated by a species they had dismissed as weak farmers and traders. The Galactic Concordat, which had called for restraint after the Colonie massacres, suddenly became very interested in peace negotiations. They offered to mediate between humanity and the Zethkari Empire, hoping to prevent further violence. President Carter's response was broadcast across the galaxy. The Galactic Concordat had the chance to stand with justice when innocent humans were being murdered. Instead, they chose to stand with the murderers. There will be no negotiations, there will be no ceasefire, there will be no peace until every war criminal pays for what they have done. The message was clear to every species in the galaxy. Humanity was no longer the peaceful farmers who had asked for nothing but friendship. They had become something far more dangerous, warriors with the technology to back up their words and the will to use it. The dragon had awakened, and its fire was just beginning to burn. The final battle for the Zethkari homeworld began 1 year after the massacre at New Eden. Admiral Nathan Cross stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the largest human fleet ever assembled prepare for the assault. 800 ships hung in space around him, each one a masterpiece of human engineering and determination. These were not the exploration vessels that had once carried peaceful scientists to distant stars. These were instruments of justice, built by a species that had learned the hard way that some evils could only be stopped with force. Orbital defenses are exactly as our intelligence predicted, reported Captain Derek Walsh from his Phoenix-class fighter. The new ships were so advanced they seemed to dance through space, moving faster and more gracefully than anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Zethkari homeworld was protected by massive weapon platforms floating in orbit, each one the size of a small moon. Energy shields surrounded the planet like a glowing bubble. The enemy's home fleet of 2,000 warships waited in defensive formation, determined to protect their capital world at any cost. "They have nowhere to run this time," Cross said quietly. "No colonies to hide behind, no innocents to use as shields. Today they face justice." The battle began with a coordinated strike that showed how much humanity had learned about warfare in just 1 year. Phoenix fighters led by Commander Walsh swept through the orbital defenses like arrows shot from a bow, their quantum weapons punching holes in the alien platforms faster than they could be repaired. At the same time, Major Kelly, Price led Marine assault pods through the chaos. Her soldiers wore powered armor that made them faster and stronger than any Zethkari warrior. Their drop pods fell through the planet's atmosphere like meteors, carrying death to the monsters who had murdered children. The space battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Human ships fought with perfect coordination, their AI systems sharing information instantly across the entire fleet. When one captain discovered a weakness in enemy armor, every ship knew about it in seconds. When a tactical pattern proved successful, the entire fleet adopted it immediately. The Zethkari, meanwhile, fought the same way they always had, with brute force and rigid tactics that never changed. Their commanders were too proud to learn from their mistakes and too stubborn to try new strategies. "Their left flank is collapsing," reported Admiral Tucker from his battle group. "The enemy is falling back toward the planet." "Maintain pressure," Cross ordered. "Do not let them regroup." The human fleet pressed forward like a steel fist closing around the alien capital. Quantum torpedoes tore through Zethkari battle cruisers as if they were made of paper. Stealth ships appeared behind enemy lines, striking at command vessels before vanishing again into the darkness of space. On the planet's surface, Major Price and her Marines were fighting a different kind of war. The Zethkari military had built their headquarters inside a mountain, thinking the rock would protect them from orbital bombardment. They had not planned for human soldiers who could fight their way through solid stone. "Breach charges ready," Price reported as her team reached the outer blast doors. The explosives they carried were designed by human engineers who had studied every weakness in Zethkari construction. The doors that had been built to withstand nuclear weapons disappeared in a flash of light and heat. Price led her Marines through the smoking gap, their weapons ready for anything the enemy could throw at them. But the Zethkari were not prepared for what they faced. Human soldiers in powered armor moved faster than their eyes could follow. Human weapons fired with deadly accuracy that never missed its target. Most importantly, human warriors fought with a fury that came from remembering the children who had died screaming in their schools. "For New Eden," Price shouted as her team stormed the command center. "For Haven's Rest." The Zethkari military commanders tried to fight, but they were creatures who had spent centuries bullying weaker species. They had never faced soldiers who were stronger, faster, and angrier than they were. The space battle ended when Admiral Cross personally led the final assault on the enemy command ship. The massive alien vessel had been the pride of the Zethkari fleet, a floating fortress that had never been defeated in 300 years of war. It took Cross exactly 17 minutes to tear it apart. "Enemy flagship is destroyed," he reported. "Remaining Zethkari vessels are surrendering." But Cross was not finished. Not yet. The drop pod carrying him to the planet's surface landed in the courtyard of the Zethkari Imperial Palace. He walked through the ornate halls where alien emperors had planned the conquest of peaceful species. His boots echoed on floors, where the orders for genocide had been given. Emperor Vashitar waited for him in the throne room, surrounded by the last of his royal guards. The alien ruler was 8 feet tall with scales like black armor and eyes like burning coals. He had ordered the death of 130,000 humans without a moment of hesitation. "So the soft-skinned mammals think they have won," Vashitar hissed. "You cannot hold our empire. We have ruled this galaxy for 1,000 years." Cross looked at the creature who had murdered Amy Morrison and her classmates. He thought about Jake Morrison dying while trying to save his people. He remembered Lisa Campbell and the mining families buried under tons of rock. "You thought us weak because we chose peace," Cross said quietly. "You mistook restraint for inability. You believed that because we did not start wars, we could not finish them. Today you learn the difference." The Emperor's guards tried to fight, but they fell within seconds to Cross's personal weapons. Vashitar himself barely had time to realize what was happening before human justice found him. The Zethkari Empire surrendered unconditionally within hours of their emperor's death. Their military was disbanded, their weapons destroyed, and their expansion permanently ended. The surviving Zethkari leadership faced war crimes tribunals, where human prosecutors presented evidence of their atrocities with cold precision. But humanity's victory extended far beyond military conquest. The former Zethkari worlds were rebuilt, according to human principles: democratic government, individual rights, and peaceful cooperation between species. The reptilian people, freed from their tyrannical rulers, discovered what life could be like when strength was used to protect rather than oppress. The Galactic Concordat, shocked by humanity's swift and total victory, immediately offered alliance, treaties, and membership privileges they had denied before. President Carter accepted, but only on humanity's terms. The new Galactic Order would recognize human leadership and guarantee that no species would ever again face unprovoked genocide. Other alien empires that had been planning their own aggressive expansions suddenly decided that peaceful trade was a much better idea. The galaxy learned that humanity would tolerate many things, but the murder of innocents was not one of them. The war ended where it had begun, with a memorial service for the dead. Admiral Cross stood on the rebuilt New Eden, looking out over fields of golden wheat that grew where plasma craters had once scarred the Earth. The colony had been reconstructed exactly as it was before, but with hidden defenses that could protect it from any threat. Children played in the same fields where Amy Morrison had once found her blue flower. Their laughter carried on the wind, mixing with the sound of farming machines and the everyday business of life. But these children grew up knowing that their freedom had been bought with blood, and that vigilance was the price of peace. The memorial wall bore the names of all 130,000 civilians who had died in the massacre. Jake Morrison's name was there, along with his daughter Amy's. Lisa Campbell's name was carved next to those of the mining families she had tried to save. The inscription read, "Here lie those who died in peace, believing in the goodness of strangers. Their sacrifice awakened the dragon, and the galaxy learned that humanity's greatest strength lies not in our weapons, but in our unwillingness to let evil triumph over innocence." Alien ambassadors from across the galaxy attended the memorial ceremony. They came not just to pay respects, but to understand the species that had transformed from peaceful farmers to galactic protectors in the span of 2 years. They left with a clear understanding. Humanity preferred peace, but they were never defenseless. They would trade with anyone, cooperate with everyone, and help those in need. But they would also destroy without mercy anyone who threatened the innocent. As the ceremony ended and the ambassadors departed, Admiral Cross remained standing before the memorial wall. A young girl, granddaughter of one of the original colonists, came up to him carrying a small blue flower, the same kind Amy Morrison had found so many years ago. "My teacher says you helped save us from the monsters," she said, offering him the flower. Cross knelt down and accepted the gift. "We all did, sweetheart, and we always will." The child smiled and ran back to her friends. Cross stood up and looked out over the peaceful colony, where families were building good lives under the protection of humanity's strength. The dragon slept again, but the galaxy would never forget the price of awakening it. In the stars above, human ships patrolled the spaceways, ensuring that no innocent child would ever again die screaming in their classroom, while monsters rained fire from the sky. Peace had returned to the galaxy, but it was a different kind of peace. It